Okay, so the book rested overnight, it dried out. This is what we're looking at now. You know, pretty comfortable with the way this has turned out. Now, externally, the book's basically complete. You know, it's looking pretty good. We've got work to do internally though. So, as you can see, we don't have any paste down or fly in place at the moment. We've got this sort of fabric and so on exposed. And we're straight into the title page. So we need to think about how we're going to fix that. So what I've found really makes for a very good result is this paper. This is Gampi paper. It's available from Hollanders. It has a really nice sort of off-white fibrous tone to it with bits of wood sort of flecked into it, as you can see. Now, one sheet is translucent, so you will get shape showing through from beneath, but when you add a second sheet, it becomes just about transparent. It becomes just about opaque, and it just looks, I think, really, really good. So the plan is going to be as follows. This particular sheet here is just big enough to do the front of the book, and I have another sheet as well which I'll use for the back. But in simple terms, what I do is I fold it in four, like this. So what we're going to do inside, so I'm going to make use of the fact that obviously the sheet was sort of cut on an industrial sort of cutter of some kind. So I've got a good sort of rectangular corners here. I can, you know, have good comfort that this is exactly 90 degrees here. So what I'm going to do is basically glue in a double thickness here that lines up, obviously this is too big, it needs trimming, but lines up with the corners, like so. And it will then come out like this, which means that basically we'll have two loose flies here, and the double thickness in effect here serving as the paste down. And that'll be a really nice sort of front for the book. It's you know, obviously there isn't a great deal of sort of 450-year-old paper lying around, so it's not as if I could recycle sheets of paper. I do have a very small amount of it, but I'm going to need that for sort of sealing these edges as a final finish when we're done. But Gampi is a pretty good modern second best to use in a situation like this, and it's also a good match just color wise with not just the color of the text block, but also the fact the leather's relatively light in color is helpful as well. So that's going to be the plan. So I'm going to lightly glue this Gampi sheet in effect to itself to create the double thickness here, and then just take the time to really make sure that I'm gluing these really well and accurately to get a really good corner here. So I'm a very consistent depth. And that's going to result in the sheets not quite being the same dimension as the text box. What I'm going to do is trim the flies so they're going to sit slightly smaller than the text block, which is generally what you want. You don't want the flies actually sitting proud of the text block when you close the book. So that's the plan on the paste down. So thinking through what's the best way I sort of make life easy for myself as I glue these two sheets together. One thought that did just occur to me was, before I do anything with any glue, if I simply align the two sheets up perfectly, like so, and then I'm going to do something a little bizarre. The camera's going to shake. I'm actually going to loosen the clamp that's holding the camera. And use it to hold the paper in place. Apologies if I'm shaking things around a little bit. So what that now does is hold the two sheets in place, which basically means I can fold this guy back like that, put glue on this surface, and I think I should then just be able to flip it back and it'll actually be relatively well behaved. So I think the technique I'm going to use here with this glue is, the aim isn't really to put glue on the paper. The aim is instead to spread a really gluey brush around all of the paper. So think of it that way. So I'm actually going to just start in this corner here and spread. Again, what you want is a gluey brush, not dobs of glue, as it were. I'm going to, as you can see, I'm moving relatively fast. Obviously the paper is going to absorb the glue and start to deform a little bit, so the longer you wait, the trickier the whole exercise becomes. And it's more important to get the glue, around the edges and worrying too much about the center, because the edges will hold in the center. Honestly, that's enough. It doesn't need any more. So hopefully I should now be able to bring in this edge and make it marry just about exactly there. Marry down there. And what I'm now going to do is loosen the clamp, because it's done its job. Now, because I've stuck these two edges, I'm going to lift this up and lay it back down, and hopefully it'll lie flat without any bubbles. And that looks to have worked. Okay, so we now have a double. Let's get this clamp completely out of the way. So we now have a double thickness with the paper, like that. I'm going to just give it, this really won't need too long to dry. I didn't use an enormous quantity of glue, but we're now in a position to turn this into our paste down on the book. Okay, so I've got the text block sort of protected by this sheet here, you can just see on the right. We've got the main area to do the paste down just here. Again, it's a case of really focusing on the edges. Which isn't great because I'm using the glue pot to actually support the book. So I'm going to have to pause for a second and get some more glue. Okay, this is by magic. The glue pot has now refilled itself. One area I'm going to put quite a significant amount of glue down in is along this edge. I want to make sure that this fabric really does dry flat, because it'll help stop the any risk of the cover having a little bit of play in it when it's opened. I know that probably doesn't mean a great deal when this is being kind of really demonstrated, but anyway. The other thing I'm going to do is just apply a small amount of glue to the actual gampy sheet I'm going to do, but only just along the edge. I want the very edge of the sheet to be sticky as well. Bottom edge doesn't matter so much because that's actually going to have to be cut and trimmed anyway. So here we go. What we're going to do is we want this to be about 1/4 inch in from the top and from the side. And just get it so that it looks pleasing to the eye, frankly. Work your way in from top left corner to the bottom right inner edge. I'm hoping that once the glue dries, we'll lose some of this, a little bit of this translucence here. And there's still a little bit of presence of the leather you can see sort of coming through here, but I didn't feel it worth. I'm totally fine basically without showing through a little bit. So that's that sheet of paste down in place. I'm now going to put an extra sheet of protective kitchen towel basically just there. Bring this back. And then in due course we're going to trim the fly here at the base and at the fore edge. First we're going to do exactly the same thing to the back of the book. So now both the gampies are starting to glue. It occurred to me that I think it's going to be a lot easier for me to trim the bottom edge here if I actually do a fold and cut before it dries. I think if I try and do it afterwards, it's just going to result in more of a ragged edge. So what I'm doing is, see that? Just folding it along like that while it's still wet. Now, general rule is use the longest bladed pair of scissors you can. And then this is why I'm doing this now before it actually fully dries and sets. I'm going to actually just pull it away slightly and cut along the fold. First I need the fold to be very prominent. It's actually a little trickier than it is because of the lighting in here. It's actually very difficult to actually see the fold. edge. Measure twice, cut once. Honestly, this is this is why I always make the best use I can of the, I'm not very good at it, bluntly, and I always make the best use I can of the machined edges to at least get me 2 straight edges, so that it minimizes the degree to which I create a ragged edge along the one remaining edge. But it's never perfect, so, but it's easier to address while there's still a bit of dampness around and the glue is not completely set, because then you can just lift this up a little, add a bit of glue along the edge here, and stick back down, like so. Wipe off the glue as best we can. Okay. So I'll do that. The same for the other edge. Trimming the actual flies is going to be a little bit different, slightly different method. But I think this way at least we get the paste downs done. Okay. So we're almost there. So the first thing to say is, as you can see, I'm actually not brilliant at doing this final trimming. I'm basically using scissors. It's almost impossible to get the measurement precisely right and sort of guillotine it ahead of time. And the problem with that approach is that sort of paste downers and flies have to fit 2 different objects. They need to be a certain distance in from the edge of the boards, but at the same time they need to also fit well against the text block, and those are 2 different objects, so even though they're very closely related. So the way in which I've found it best to actually do the trimming is to do a simple fold, and then in simple terms use the longest bladed pair of scissors that you can. And what typically I do is make sure that before I start my cut, I want to make sure the full length of the inner blade is up against the fold, and then just cut in one small motion. Go as far in as I can again, make sure the full length of the inner blade is in the fold. And do it again. And this is, there must be better ways, but this is honestly as good as I can get it. So just doing it smoothly all the way up, and then basically repeating that for the other edges. Obviously, you want to make sure the actual paper is as set back as possible. The result should be, it's okay for the flies to be a little bit shorter than the text block. In fact, that's how you want it, because this is modern paper, and what you don't want is the fly sort of standing proud of the text block when the book is folded. The other thing just to point out is you can see the sort of, I'll just bend the camera slightly. You can see the slight wonkiness here in terms of the way the measurements change. Obviously here the fly is trying to match the board, here the fly is trying to match a text block. So the result is you'll always have a slight sort of change there. Same principle there. All the way along. Like so. Okay. So I just treated the leather with this guy comprehensively. I mean, it's a brand new leather, but even so, I mean, it's been through a lot of abuse, so I wanted to get this sort of polymer that this contains into the structure to help defend it. And then the final thing I'm going to treat it with is, and this is bluntly a bit of vanity on my part, I would never use this on an old leather, but I think it's fine for the purposes of a brand new leather, just to show it off a little bit and just make it look really cool. Is this stuff called leather honey, just for a brand new leather only. I don't think in the long run it really sort of protects old leathers, but just from the purposes of the reveal, it'll just really show it off in a really beautiful way. It's interesting, you can see the sort of, you see sort of the engineering underneath the leather there of how we sort of put the book back together, so it's kind of nice. Just occasionally you see that with very old books as well, you know, which it hints that there's medieval fragments and other goings on beneath. Okay, so I think this is basically now ready to conclude and reveal. So here we have it. What we have here is a 1576 copy of the Justinian Codices, so a great big legal volume, complete, laid out in a very traditional sort of medieval style, really, where you have the codex in the middle, the notes, and the notes on the outside edge, with numbered columns, not numbered pages. A really beautiful, complete book with some nice little sort of, as you can see, the two different colours and woodcuts at the starts of paragraphs for the capitalisation of the letters. A really gorgeous book, well worth saving. 1576, so this book is 450 years old. Really looking pretty good. Beautifully restored. Really pretty happy with the result here. This book has I think a good future ahead of it. So if you've liked these videos, please give us a like. By all means, subscribe to the channel. Any feedback, leave it in the comments. I'm always very willing to learn, but there we go. On to the next restoration.